Welcome to All Villa, No Filler. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. This is Rivalries, the show where we meet fans from rival clubs. Aston Villa play Manchester City at home on Saturday. So who better to speak about what Villa should expect than David Mooney, who runs the award-winning Blue Moon podcast. Great to have you on again, David.
I was going to say great to be back, but given what City are doing at the minute, maybe it's not. It's one of those where the tables have well and truly turned with City and Villa at the moment. Where years and years of City causing Villa misery, it could be quite painful this weekend.
Yeah, hopefully it's a follow up for last season at Villa Park, which was one of the most incredible performances I've ever seen in my life from a Villa team. But look, you've mentioned it there. I mean, we've got to start on this. What is going on at City at the moment?
It's a kind of a perfect storm of a lot of things happening right now. Obviously they lost Rodri earlier in the season, which not the end of the world. It's one of those things that could have been detrimental to a title challenge had everything else been normal and fine. But it's one of those things where, like, up until the point where they'd lost Rodri, they hadn't really played with him this season anyway. They had won most of the games to that point too. So they were getting by. And then out of nowhere, injuries and fatigue have happened to the point where it's just fallen apart. So in previous seasons where players would get injured, Guardiola would have other players to be able to come in, deputise, and like just jiggle things around a bit. And then when they were back, he'd go back to rotating. The same players are having to play week after week after week. And what's happened is they are shot for confidence because the things that they do normally to see out games aren't working for them. They can't keep possession. They can't. They're being too easily played through right now, and kind of mad things are happening, which is affecting the confidence and the decision making. So they're making further bad decisions, and they can't be taken out of the team because there's nobody available to come in and replace them. And then on top of that, when players, there are some players who have had to play through injury. So Akanji and Ake and Guardiola at various different stages have played whilst injured. Kyle Walker as well, and then that's had one effect on the team. You've then got the fatigue of everybody else who's having to play week after week after week after week after week, and then combine all of that with the fact that they're completely shot of confidence. They're making stupid decisions, and they're consistently doing things that give me as a fan and kind of pretty much everybody in the Etihad no real sense of confidence that they're going to be able to see out a lead or see out a game at various different stages. And it's snowballed and got a little bit out of control at this stage. And I'll be honest with you, I don't really know how you solve it beyond going to get a few players in January, because the squad they've always rolled with the small squad thing, and they've always rolled with we'd much rather deal with having 2018 happy players and not anybody unhappy that they can't get on the pitch, and take the risk of there being an injury crisis. For 4 years, that's worked, and they've won the title each year. This year, it's just not working, and this year, it's going to be the year that it bites them on the backside, which. You take the rough with the smooth. It's been beneficial for 4 years. It's not beneficial this year. It's just kind of how it goes sometimes, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say that last season I think Rodri didn't play at Villa Park when we won there, and I think I'd actually kind of forgotten that at that period of time, City had a couple of dodgy results. I
The
think
real
when
wobble,
Rodri was
yeah.
out. Is Rodri that important? I mean, he won the Ballon d'Or. I think he's absolutely insanely brilliant player.
Mm.
I mean, is it literally the case that can City not sort of are City just nowhere near as good when he's not there? And given the fact that there was some hints last season that when Rodri does get injured, City aren't quite as good, does it suggest that the squad planning's not been quite as elite as it usually is at City?
There's a few schools of thought here because, obviously City are a much better team with Rodri in it. At the same time, it's really difficult to go out there and get a player of Rodri's caliber and standard. I mean, I'm not sure there is somebody who is that anyway, but somebody who's close to that, and say to them, Okay, well, when you're both available, it's going to be Rodri that's going to play. So then you then have to kind of look at the options slightly below that, and that's what they tried with Calvin Phillips, and that's what they've tried with, I assume, Matthias Nunes, but he's ended up like he's not been given an opportunity in the centre of midfield, which I think says a lot about what Guardiola thinks about how he is as a player.
Mm.
The Calvin Phillips experiment was, I mean, it's been an absolute disaster for both the player and the club. Um, they ended up getting a player that isn't what they thought they were going to get. So, you know, it was perfectly obvious he couldn't come in and deputise for Rodri. I mean, the fact that he called that week of last season when Rodri was suspended for 3 games, he was suspended for the Newcastle League Cup game, Arsenal at the Emirates, and then Wolves at Molineux, and then he got booked in the next game, I think, off on 4 yellows. So I think he was then suspended for Villa Park as well. Um, Calvin Phillips called that the biggest week of his career. He didn't play once. He played 45 minutes against Newcastle in the League Cup, which was what he was always going to play in that game. Um, which kind of says to me that the management at that stage knew it was over for him, and he was just not going to be the player that they thought he was going to be. So in terms of squad planning, maybe there has been a bit of an issue. I mean, there's more of an issue, I think, is not having that, not having. I've got too many knots in there now. I've confused myself. But the absence of a holding midfielder is not the issue. The absence of players who can come in and deputise elsewhere really has been. And I think, I mean, part of it is unlucky because I don't think you expect Stones, Ake, Akanji, and Gvardiol to all be injured at the same time. And if you'd have said at the summer, with those four available, if you'd said in the summer, what we really need is another centre back, then, people would have been marching you off to have the doctor stick you in a white coat. So there's there's an element of, the squad planning hasn't been great because ultimately, numbers wise, they knew this season was going to be longer than any other previously because of the extended Champions League. They've got the Club World Cup at the end of it, which I don't know how he's going to take any first team players to that. It's going to have to simply be anybody who's still walking by the end of the season because there's so many games between now and then.
Wow.
Then maybe they should have looked at building the squad a bit bigger. But at the same time, it's not simply about Rodri not being there because I think if Rodri was there over the last few weeks, the problems that City have this season are so fundamental in the profile of the squad and what the squad can and can't do. I don't think he's the difference at the moment.
No.
I think he would be a difference, but I don't think he is the difference that would be between City winning a fifth title in a row and not. And I think that you look at players like Gundogan, for instance, who was they when he left, he wanted it. The reason he left is he wanted a 2-year deal, and City were only prepared to offer him a 1-year deal. This would have been the de facto second year of that deal. And they brought him back, and he's not. All the concerns that they had about that second year of the deal are coming true. He's not. He doesn't have the legs to be able to play in the centre of midfield anymore. He doesn't have. He's the ball gets the wrong side of him. He's too easily bypassed. And the thing with City at the minute is if you get the wrong side of Bernardo and Gundogan and the centre midfield, you are in because they're not getting back. I don't think that's a Rodri thing. I think that's a everybody else isn't up to it either thing.
Yeah, when I saw the lineup against United the other day and saw Gundogan sort of sitting, I think he was centre midfield, and I
Yeah.
thought, oof, it's a big ask for him at even just at
But
that
also
age to do that.
you watch what City did in that game. They're not playing as they normally do because
Mm.
they're not pressing. They were sitting off, and
Yeah.
that says to me Guardiola doesn't think they've got the legs to press anymore. Like
Mhm.
if they can't if they step up and they press the ball and United get 2 or 3 passes around them, they haven't got the legs to get back, so they can't take that proactive approach anymore. And so you kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place because what does Guardiola do to
Mm.
make things more secure? Well, his team keeps possession, they press high, and the things that he would normally fall back on as the solutions to the problems that City have. And City are so vulnerable to transitions at the moment,
Yeah.
where they give the ball up and they a couple of passes, the other team will play through the pressure and they're through. He's so wary of that what happens is City get a corner in the 87th minute while winning 1-0 against United. They put not a great cross into the box, but they got an opportunity to recycle the ball. And they end up passing it a couple of times across midfield, and it ends up with Matthias Nunes in the right back position, playing a short pass back to Edison. And it's ultimately an individual mistake. But why is Nunes in that position of making that pass there? It's because City don't have the personnel and the profile anymore to be able to keep the ball higher up in the pitch. They have possession, but with no penetration, and they have no threat with that possession. And in all the safety of we have the ball, we don't give it away. If we have the ball, the opposition can't score. Completely blown away there because City keep giving the ball away, and they keep opening up these vulnerable avenues for them to be attacked. And I kind of think that the more Guardiola looks at it and the more he thinks, well, what can I do to stop these problems? The answer is always keep the ball. And like it's just this kind of this snowball effect then, because the more they try and do the things that they should be good at, the more they're getting the things wrong, and the more it's presenting opportunities to the opposition. So, I mean, you say, this can't carry on. I think it can until they can get more athleticism into the team, and they can't do that till January.
Yeah, it's really fascinating listening to that. It sounds not dissimilar to what's going on at Aston Villa in some occasions where Unai Emery's philosophy is keep the ball. And I even asked this after the Forest game where I keep saying this calendar year where Villa, often we take 1-0, 2-0 leads and then the other up team throw the game plan out the window, go full pelt at Villa. And we never look like we physically are capable of reacting. We always stand still as if nothing's changed. And it could possibly that. It could be literally that Unai Emery's game management is similar to describe with Guardiola, just keep the ball.
Yeah,
and
because there's no way managers like Emery, like Guardiola are going to look at this and go, well, you know what we need to do? Let them have the ball, drop off, sit deep, and pack the defense. That's just not. It's not there. They don't see the game that way. And so, as much as you can hear pundits on TV and you can hear fans saying we need to try something different, actually, what City did against United was different to what they normally do. They didn't press high. They did sit a little bit deeper, the defensive line. And still, the same old problems were coming around. And because the thing that was tried was not radically different, wasn't, sit deep, lump it to the big man, or like play a lot of kids, whatever. People don't see it as the manager's trying something different. But you look at what Emery's doing at Villa and what Guardiola has done at City. They're so possession based. They're not like there's absolutely no point in throwing everything out of the window until January because you can go and sign a few players and get your style of play back in January. That doesn't make any sense to do. The only thing to do is to kind of keep trying what you could be good at. And I think I say City struggle with transitions. Somebody put it to us the other week. If transitions are that dangerous that Guardiola's so scared of them, why doesn't he use them more? And it's a good point. But the only counter argument I've got to that is that City are not very good in transition. You give them the ball in transition, they tend to mess it up, and what they do when they mess it up is they give it away, leave themselves exposed, and then get transitioned upon. So the entire point of trying to protect against the transitions is okay. We don't have any, but you don't have any either. The problem is now City don't have any, but the opposition still have them. And just because City are bad at defending transitions doesn't mean that we should lean into doing more of them, because they're also bad at using them. So it's kind of a rock and a hard place. You really have to kind of minimise what's going on with City's vulnerabilities. And again, I come back round to the same point. I don't know how you can do that without getting a bit more athleticism into the team.
Yeah, and it's really interesting as well, how both Aston Villa and Manchester City are both in the Champions League this season. Obviously, Champions League games have their own intensity because you're playing really, really high level opposition. And I think for me as not used to the Champions League, the thing that stunned me from the beginning of October is just think how often Villa are playing. Just constantly. And, it's probably not a coincidence that both Villa and City look a bit like, and, other Champions League clubs are, like this weekend, for instance, like Arsenal drew with Everton, having just played midweek against Monaco. It sort of feels a little bit like there must be something to it. And there's only a certain level of intensity you can reach regularly when you've got this many games. And so I guess coming into this weekend, it's probably the first week that Villa and City have both had 5 or 6 days off where they can sort of work on something a little bit different. So how do you feel going into the game this weekend? Do you expect Guardiola to change something, or Are you nervous that it could be a continuation of the poor form City are currently in?
I don't really see how it's not a continuation. There's not really a lot he can change at the minute, other than get players back fit, and I mean he's not. That's not going to happen for the weekend. I think the worry is it's almost like his hands are tied. There's almost like there's nothing that City can do at the moment to stop this. It just kind of they need a bit of bad luck. Listen, City haven't been as bad as the results suggest,
Right.
but at the same time they haven't been very good at all. The results previously, in order to beat City, I don't think this applies to the game at Villa Park last season, but I guess you could kind of make a case for it in that sense. Previously, the opposite, there had to be a perfect storm of factors. The opposition had to be really, really good. City had to be below par, and the opposition would probably have to survive a lot of pressure and a lot of chances, and take one or two of their only chances. And that's normally the formula for a City defeat in these sorts of games, whoever it's against. But in recent years, and in certainly in the last 2 years, the trend has kind of come a little bit towards the middle of that. City haven't needed to be quite as bad as they had needed to be previously. The opposition haven't needed to be quite as good as they have previously, to the point where we are now, where actually, I mean, if you watch the Manchester derby at the weekend, United were terrible. United
Awful.
were really, really bad.
Yeah.
And the only reason they won that game is because City didn't fancy winning it themselves, and that's it. Like it was the only reason. You could make the case the other way around. The only reason City would have won the derby is because United didn't fancy winning it. But that's such a far cry from where City are and where City should be, given what's gone on for the 4 years. And I mean, you talked about intensity in the Champions League. I also think one of the factors into this season is that it is just the fifth season. There's
Yeah. Right.
there's only so many times you can keep eking every single inch out of every single part of every single player. And if this is the season where you can't do it, then so be it. It comes in the context of having won 4 titles in a row. I don't think you can get that upset that they haven't won a fifth in a row. It's like it's perfectly fair for it to be somebody else's turn this season to win the title. They've spent 4 years non-stop going again and again and again and again and again. And maybe it's just caught up with them this season, and that's fine if it has. And I think there has to be a kind of a recognition that yeah, it's below where we hoped for this season. And if they didn't make the Champions League, for instance, it would be a big story, and it would be a big kind of failure for the season. But at the same time, given everything they've achieved over the last 4 years, I think they're allowed to fail for a season, as long as it doesn't start a rot that carries on in a mold that did for Chelsea for quite a while. I mean, Chelsea look like they've got their act together this season, but you kind of wait and see what's happened with them. You just don't want it to spiral for too long. I think the fixes come in the transfer market, and I'm not too worried that City will kind of continue down this spiral long term. But I think I'm not expecting it to be a happy Christmas. Let's put it that way. I think City go to Villa this weekend. They've got Everton on Boxing Day, which is it should be fine, but it's banana skin territory given how Dyche sets up. And I think they've got Leicester on either New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, and again, Leicester should be fine, but all these should be's. That's where City are right now. It's try not to make too many mistakes, and you might get something out of the game. That's kind of where we're at. As long as at the weekend, I'm fearful that City will put in another performance that Villa could. It could get ugly, but at the same time, if Villa don't take those opportunities, then City could nick it. It really is all over the scale.
And we do have a tendency to not take our big chances this season. I think we're I think we're the team most underperforming our big chances, annoyingly.
Did you see the stat recently from the 1st of November? City are bottom of the table.
Really?
That's how badly it's gone recently.
Wow. Well, again, looking at Saturday, I don't know how often you get to watch Aston Villa, really. We're probably on TV more than we ever used to be. But is there any particular Villa player you have concerns about going into this weekend?
Oh, all of them. All of them. Any of them could cause problems this season. I think... So I've not seen Villa that much. I've seen a couple of Champions League games. I saw you win over Bayern Munich, and you were very good that night. I saw you have that. Was it was it Bruges where the last minute goal was disallowed? And I don't really know what for at Villa Park.
Juventus.
Juventus, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And like I thought you were a little bit less good in
Yeah.
that one, but it was. But again, I don't really understand why that goal was disallowed. So fine. Um, uh, yeah, John Duran is he's scoring goals. That causes me nightmares because City's defense at the minute can't keep a clean sheet for love nor money. What the back four will look like, I don't know. Kyle Walker's well out of form. Rico Lewis has had a difficult season so far. He's struggled a bit this year with the physicality of everything. Diaz is back, which is a big positive, but everybody else is injured. Guardiola might have to play centre back again. I don't fancy it when we come up against a striker like Duran. I mean, you mentioned Morgan Rogers on Blue Moon when we spoke a few minutes ago, and he's another one who. I mean, almost a fantasy league automatic pick at the minute, isn't he? So
Yeah, yeah.
it's kind of like anybody who regularly racks up goals and assists or regularly influences games from that midfield pocket will cause City problems because as soon as you get the wrong side of Gundogan and Bernardo, then you're in and they're not getting back, and that could be a problem. I would, in many ways, I kind of want Guardiola to look at this weekend's game and go, you know what? Gundogan, Bernardo, Walker, these players cannot keep playing. They're either out of form, knackered, injured. They need a rest, and it just so be it. If it means that we end up with the likes of Jacob Wright or Nico O'Reilly, inexperienced young players, but players who have some athleticism to their game. If we lose the game by them making mistakes, so be it. But we're probably going to lose the game anyway. So why not do it doing something with why not do it with a chance of players who have the chance of being athletic in that centre and give the senior players a little bit of a rest. Than kind of go down with a whimper again. Because I think if there's a real danger City could go out of the game at the weekend with a whimper, and you'll all turn up at Villa Park, you'll watch the game, and you'll go, "Whoa, what was City trying to do? That didn't look very good at all." And it's been the story of the last 11 games, really.
And City obviously still have incredible players, even if they're underperforming. How do you think you can hurt Villa? Is there any player particularly in form at the moment that you think they might be able to get a job done?
They've got to get Foden on the ball. They just got to get Foden on the ball. He was the only player who, in the derby, was any good. They could only get him on the ball once every 10 minutes or so. But every time they did, they looked like something might happen. But beyond that, I honestly don't know. I'd like to see. I mean, here's the other thing. I'd like to see Jack Grealish in the middle again,
Mm.
because they did that against Forest and it looked really, really good. And he looked really, really good in there. And he's not really been used in the centre of the pitch for City. Now, obviously, there's the history with Aston Villa and everything else. Um, but I just kind of think uh, injuries and everything else around that centre midfield. Why he hasn't had more time in the centre of it. I mean, he's been injured himself, which hasn't helped. But why he's not, when he's been fit, hasn't been in that centre. Like he could really help shore things up in a way that Gundogan and Bernardo aren't doing at the moment. Um, I mean, Doku's another one who, on his day, Doku affects the game without really affecting the game. So I can see why, as an opposition fan, you would see him and go, "God, he keeps beating our fullback. This isn't good." But then he keeps beating your fullback and then getting into a position of squaring it and squaring it to nobody, or the
Right.
cross goes across goal when Haaland's made a near post run, it gets to the back post. That sort of thing. So there is a player in there, but it's just not quite having the end product value that it really needs to at the minute. So he, like, as much as he looks good, like almost creating something, there it's like there needs to be a little bit more creativity from him at the end of it to get something done. And Haaland is Haaland. He should score more goals than he has done recently, but his record is fantastic, and you assume he'll go back to scoring goals at some point soon. So I think if City can get Foden on the ball, they've got a chance. If they can't, then they're going to really struggle, really, really struggle.
Yeah, I've got a funny feeling pacey wingers that I just don't fancy Villa against them sometimes, and I sort of
That's all
look
right.
at
We haven't really got any, so it's all right.
yeah, yeah. I got a feeling Doku might cause us a few problems. But as you say, Foden. I remember a game we played at Villa Park 2 or 3 years ago, and one of the best performances I've seen at Villa Park from anybody in the last 10 years. He was absolutely fantastic. Um, but you've mentioned Grealish as well. Now, a common thing with Villa fans is that the magical Grealish we saw at Villa, we've not seen the same player at City. He's been molded into more of a Guardiola style of player. Um, I think there's one question mark I've always had about it as well. I remember last season De Bruyne was out. I think there was. I remember someone saying, a commentator saying maybe during the FA Cup final,
Mm.
that City had nobody to replace De Bruyne. Now, of course, there is nobody to replace De Bruyne because De Bruyne is that good. But there was part of me that also thought, like, actually, Grealish could do a really good job of it if he's given a chance.
Yeah, he had a last season. I don't know how much it was injuries, how much it was personal issues, anything like that.
Hmm.
But that by the end of the season, it was certainly a case of Guardiola had basically said to him, "Listen, go away. I don't want to see your face again around this place. Go away, sort yourself out, come back next year." And he was left out of I think the final day against West Ham and the FA Cup final, perfectly fit, but not even on the bench.
Yeah.
And that was very much a case of Guardiola going, look, this season's been a write-off. Go and sort yourself out. Come back next year. And he started pre-season pretty well, actually, and kind of looked to be getting into that, and then got injured. And then ever since then, it's just been again. He's been in and out of the team and not really had a chance. And you know, as a Villa fan, I know what your idea of Grealish is, and he isn't that at City.
Yeah.
I really like Grealish. I really like what he is to City and the control that he was bringing, certainly in that treble winning team. But I think we get to the end of this season, and if he's had another season if he has another second half of the season as he's had a first half of the season, we'll look at it and go, he had a difficult first year. His second year was fantastic. His third year was non-existent, and he's had a difficult fourth year. And you're kind of going at that point, like that's on the player at this point
Yeah.
because it's you can have one bad season, you can have you can be unlucky with injuries, you can't have three bad seasons in four, and that's kind of a problem. Certainly, if you're the club's record signing as well, the eyes are on you. So it's a real difficult one. I still live in hope that he can be the player that City need him to be, and that isn't the player that he was at Aston Villa, because City's setup is completely different to what that Aston Villa was,
Yeah.
and I think what he can be to City is incredible. We just haven't seen it enough.
Yeah. I mean, do you think his days are numbered? Do you think he's probably going to be leaving soon?
If it carries on like this, yeah, I don't. I think there's almost an element of come January, if City can get some decent business done and recover something of this season to finish in the top four, whatever it is, and then do more business in the summer. Grealish is one of those players that could be on the way out as a nobody's safe sort of view. There's a kind of feeling that they need to do a bit of a refresh anyway. You look at players like De Bruyne, who he's in the last year of his contract. I'm not convinced they'll renew it. I think it's very much. He's been a great player for City. He still is quite a good player on his day. But he struggles with injuries. He's older than he once was, and doesn't move quite as mobile as mobilely. I don't know if that's the word. It doesn't quite as move as easily as he used to.
Yeah.
It could be the right time. They'll probably move on Carl Walker. He's not had a good 2 years. There's some players who are sticking plasters who you would go, don't really want to lose them, but rip the sticking plaster off now, make the change, and actually freshen it up a bit. And I think Grealish is very much in the not safe camp.
Okay. Well, it's a bit of a fool's errand doing predictions, but we dare to do them here. So, this Saturday, you got any score prediction in mind?
Yeah, as long as you keep it under three, I'll be happy. I don't see really. So I don't see how City score, and I don't see how Aston Villa don't score, which is a kind of a real problem at the minute. Um, We'll be generous to City. We'll say 2-2. I think City are really struggling to put the ball in the net at the minute. They're really struggling to keep it out at the other end. If Villa are the same in any way, shape, or form, they could cancel each other out in the good old stoppable force meets movable object sort of way, rather than the good way. So let's go 2-2, and I'll shake hands on that now and be happy
Yeah.
with it.
That's my exact prediction as well, 2-2. I just think two teams that keep conceding, but both score. And I think if Villa, we tend to give away stupid goals all the time. Quite often our defenders will pass it straight to midfielder, but it actually goes to the opposition attacker when they're pressing. And if we do that against City, we're going to get punished. We are going to get
I
punished.
mean, City were doing that against United. There was a good 3 or 4 times where whoever was on the wing squared it inside to where Gundogan or Bernardo should have been, and it went straight to Bruno Fernandes or it went straight to whoever, and they counter attack. So if you give it away to City, City will give it you back at some point soon. Then I'm fairly sure.
Yeah. But I'm going to say Rodgers steps up. He tends to like these big games, Rodgers. And then Duran. I think he's in such red hot scoring form. I feel like he's going to score every game at the moment. So that's what I'm going to say. But David, always a pleasure to talk to you. I could talk to you about football, I think, every day for the rest of my life. Absolutely love it.
My voice isn't going to hold out much longer, I'm afraid. So I'm going to have to go and get a hot drink.
Yeah. Well, just before you go, where can people find you and your podcast online?
Yeah, just search Blue Moon Podcast. You'll find it. It's on all the usual Apple, Spotify, all those sorts of places. Blue Moon Podcast. Let Me Talk is the one that we do with Sam Lee, but you got to be a subscriber to listen to that. And so I fully understand if a Villa fan would not want to pay the money for that. But Blue Moon Podcast is free, so go and have a listen.
Well, brilliant. It's been absolutely brilliant to chat to you, David. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.